Good morning, grade fours. How did you all sleep? More importantly, how are you doing? Are you doing well? Are you energetic? Are you in a good mood? Or did you wake up on the wrong side of the bed? But either way, you are here and you're here with me and we are learning. And I don't know about you, but I'm really enjoying this section because as I teach the solar system, I always learn something new about the solar system, even if it's from watching documentaries or reading up about something interesting or cool on the internet. And so I really enjoy this particular theme. Remember, boys and girls, that this lesson is brought to you by WorksheetCloud. And if you have any questions, email them to grade4@worksheetcloud.com. So just like the last time I saw you, I am going to move on to Google Earth and we are going to learn something brand new and go to a new place in our planet Earth. And so let's go. Are you with me? Let's go. Okay, so let's have a look. Right, here is our beautiful Earth. Let me make us a little bit bigger. Okay, here is our Earth. So I'm going to press on, I am feeling lucky, and let's see where it takes us. So I'm feeling lucky takes us to, it's like a random place. So let's go, let's see. So we are going to 7th kilometer market. Let's see here. This is in the Ukraine, boys and girls. How cool is this? And what's amazing about Google Earth is look at the actual image. So look at this is a particular market. So it must be a very well-known market. Let's just read a little bit more. It says, if I go into it, we'll come back to it. So this 7th kilometer market is informally known as Tolchok. Okay, I can't say that. Is an outdoor market outside of Odessa, Ukraine. Wow, so this is a particular market that is in the Ukraine, must be a massive market, very well known. You can see just by looking at it. Should we zoom in a little bit closer? Let's have a look. Let me exit this little note and then let's have a look over here. Let's have a look on a 3D effect. I quite like the 3D version of Google Earth. So what it's doing now is that it's busy loading the market from a 3D point of view, which is really cool. We can even go a little bit closer with the market. If I click on this little man over here, I am going to click on him and I'm going to drop him somewhere over there. Let's see where he goes. So it's taking us all the way around over here. Let's zoom in a little bit closer. Have a look at this market. This is really big, boys and girls. I'm fascinated. My goodness. We have to just wait for it to load a little bit, but you can even see the cars. Sure. That is amazing. So I think, I'm sure you've all learned something new, just like what I have. If we go a little bit around, we can see a little bit more about the area that this famous market is. Quite interesting. What is this? There are many cars. I must say, this market must be huge because there are many, many cars surrounding this particular place. Look at how many cars there are. So this particular market must be big, and there must be a reason why it has its own specific location. So learning something new. So I've learned something new just like you've learned something new. The wonders of our world. Okay. So let's go back to our lesson today. So today, boys and girls, is awesome because we are going to be looking at all of our different planets in our solar system and learning something new, some interesting facts about each and every one of them. And I bet you're going to learn something that is going to make your jaw drop, just like it did with mine. Your jaw is going to drop. You're going to think, oh my goodness, how on earth does that happen? I did not know that. That is amazing. Or at least I hope that's your reaction, that your reaction is going to be like that. But I'm sure it will. So let's see. Right. So we have in our solar system, we have got 8 planets in our solar system. Ooh, I don't even know where to move me. Let me move it over here. Right. There are 8 planets that orbit our solar system. So here is our sun. And the 8 planets include, we've got Mercury, Venus, Earth, there we are the 3rd planet from the sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Okay, so these are the 8 planets in our solar system. Now, the most important thing that I want to draw your attention is the word terrestrial. Okay, this L should be over there. Terrestrial planets. And the first 4 planets, these 4, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, are what we call the terrestrial planets. Now, terrestrial means rocky. They are filled with minerals, and we say that they are Earth-like for a few different reasons. In terms of size, you can see that the first 4, if we look at the size of them, they're all relative. And then look at the next 4. The next 4 are massive. They are huge. And so these 4 we put in one category. And then the gas giants we put in another category. That's why we have their own category name for the first 4 planets and then for the second 4 planets. So whenever I refer to terrestrial planets, I'm always referring to the first 4 planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Okay. If I refer to the gas giants, that is going to be Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And when we learn about each one of these, you'll understand why they have got the name gas giants. So for today's lesson, boys and girls, we are specifically going to hone in and look at the first 4 planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. So, are you ready to learn about these 4 planets, these terrestrial planets, ready to go on a journey with me and just learn something fascinating again about our solar system? Because we, over here, remember what I said last time, think about how small you are in comparison to our solar system, and it is mind-boggling. So, on that note, I'm going to start off and recap a little bit of information about the sun from last lesson. So remember that the sun is a star, and the only reason why it looks big and bright in the sky is that it is the closest star to our planet, to us. It is the closest star. Right, and so that's why it looks quite big. But in terms of it being big, it's actually just an average size. If you compare all the other stars, we get massive stars and we get smaller stars. So the sun is a bit of an average-sized star. Now, the sun, like all stars, they actually emit a light, and we call them luminous objects. So this word luminous means that they are objects that light up. And so the sun lights up. There is no other planet or object in space or in our solar system that lights up. Later, I will teach you about the moon. And one thing I'm going to teach you about the moon is that the moon does not have its own light. It doesn't have its own source of light. There's no light switch by the moon, that there's a man on the moon that switches it on at night and we're able to see it, or switches it off during the day or whatnot. There's no switch. The only reason why we see the moon, believe it or not, is because it is the sun that is reflecting on the moon, and we see that reflected part of the moon. How cool! So if you didn't know that, something new that you are learning today. Okay, so remember that all other objects in the solar system orbit the sun. So I mentioned in my previous lesson that the sun is the center of our solar system, and all the other planets and objects within the solar system are able to stay in place because they are held by a gravitational pull between the sun and those particular objects or planets. So they're held in place, but they orbit. So when we say orbit, what do I mean by the word orbit? I mean that those objects move around the sun. better word of travel, right? These objects and planets travel around the sun. Okay, so the word orbit means traveling around the sun, right? Okay, so I just had to put that in because I saw this lady and she is blonde like me, except my hair is way longer than hers. You can see my hair is very, very long. And she's wearing glasses. They happen to be red. Mine happen to be black. So, and you can see by her facial expression, she is in awe of looking through that telescope. So what do we see? What do we use to see planets? A telescope. And she looks like she is in awe of looking at those planets. Okay, so just to recap, boys and girls, remember that the solar system is made up of many objects, including the sun, 8 planets, there are meteors, and there are 3 dwarf planets. Right, 3 dwarf planets. And so we are going to start in this lesson. As I mentioned, today's lesson, we are specifically going to just look at terrestrial planets. In our next lesson, we are going to look at the gas giants. So our terrestrial planets include Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Those are our 4 terrestrial planets. Okay. So starting off with Mercury. So an interesting fact is that, did you know that every planet, every one of the 8 planets except Earth, are actually named after a Greek god of some kind? So with all the planets that I'm going to teach you about, I am going to tell you what their name is and where they got their name from. So Mercury, for example, was known as the Roman messenger to the gods. And so that's why Mercury got its name, and Mercury actually means the Roman messenger to the gods, interestingly enough. Now, Mercury is the very first planet in our solar system, because we say that it's the first because it is closest to the sun. It is very close to the sun, and because it is close to the sun, it also can get extremely cold as well. So the temperatures on Mercury vary. It can be extremely hot during the day, but extremely cold at night. Okay, so the temperatures vary. But what is interesting about Mercury is that it is the second smallest of all the planets. So that is another interesting fact. As you saw in the previous picture, when I put all the terrestrial planets together, Mercury was the second smallest. It is very dry, very hot. It's virtually airless. There is no life on Mercury. Mercury doesn't have its own moon. So remember, all the planets have the potential to have their own moons. And a moon sort of also orbits the planet like the planet orbits the sun, moves around the sun or travels around the sun. And so you'll learn later on that some planets actually have many moons. We only have one moon, and we have that moon that orbits our Earth, and we see our moon. So we don't have all these moons in the sky, but there are many other planets that do have various moons. And Mercury, unfortunately, doesn't have any moons. Shame, poor Mercury. Right, now listen to this. One day on Mercury, one day lasts approximately 58.7 Earth days. So for one Earth day that we have 24 hours, Mercury, it lasts 58.7 Earth days. Can you imagine for one day to actually last 58.7 days? Insane, right? And so that shows you how slowly Mercury revolves on its axis, revolves on its own sort of axis, whereas Earth revolves at a really good speed that we get to 24 hours in a day. Okay, and lastly, and another interesting fact is that Earth takes 365 and a quarter days in order to orbit the sun or to travel around the sun, whereas Mercury only takes 88 days to do a complete revolution and orbit around the sun. So from start to finish, Mercury takes 88 days from start to finish. Okay, very cool. So that brings us on to the very next planet in line, which is Venus. Now, how beautiful does Venus look? Venus looks beautiful. Now, an interesting fact about Venus is that Venus is almost the same size, very similar in size to that of Earth. So do you remember in the beginning when I showed you the 4 pictures of our terrestrial planets? Venus and Earth, because Earth is going to be our next planet, is very, very similar in size. Okay, so very different in what it's made up of, for sure, but it's very similar in size. So Venus gets its name from the goddess of beauty. And the reason why it is the goddess of beauty, because have you ever seen, if you look up at the sky and you see one particular star that is brighter than all the other stars, that actually isn't a star. That happens to be Venus, because Venus is the brightest and it looks like a star, but it isn't. And we call it the goddess of beauty. So that's where Venus gets its name from. Now, Venus is also a very hot planet. Its temperature goes all the way up to 482 degrees Celsius. That is cooking. Venus is also covered with very pale clouds, so it is difficult to see the surface of Venus. Venus, just like Mercury, has no moons, and so no life can exist on Venus. And lastly, it takes 225 days to orbit the sun. So do you see, boys and girls, that the further away the planets are away from the sun, the longer it will take for them to orbit around the sun. So Mercury, we saw, takes 88 days in order to orbit the sun. Venus takes 225 days to make a complete revolution and orbit around the sun. Right. Earth, good old Earth. So all of you know that we only have one moon. And as I said, unfortunately, Earth doesn't come from a Roman god. Earth is the only one that's left out. Poor Earth. But we only have one moon. 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered in water. And remember when we looked at the surfaces of Earth that the position of Earth, because we are the 3rd planet from the sun, we are in the perfect location that all liquid water on Earth, or should I say, we are able to have liquid water on Earth because of our position in the solar system. And so that's why we're able to maintain life on Earth. Now, all of you know that it takes, for 1 year, it takes 365 and a quarter, so 0.25 is a quarter days to orbit the sun. We have an atmosphere, and our atmosphere protects our planet from the rays of sun. So we get certain solar energy that is absorbed into the sun, only a certain amount, the rest is reflected away. And that is because of our atmosphere. So our atmosphere is there to protect us. And Earth is warm enough to keep most of its water from freezing and cold enough to keep its water from boiling. So our temperature in Earth in total is just right. So it is perfect. Okay, so Mars. Right, boys and girls, this is the very last planet in the terrestrial group. Right, so remember, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Now, Mars is quite small, and you can see that this is a beautiful picture of Mars. And the first thing that stands out is the color. And we can see that Mars is definitely this sort of red, rusty color. And I'll tell you where that comes from. But before I do, Mars gets its name from the god of war. So it's also known as the god of war, which is Mars. Now, Mars has very little air. It doesn't have as much air as what we've got. There's no surface water. It happens to be very cold. Now, The reason why, like I said, that the planet looks red is because the rocks on Mars, they actually contain iron, and iron makes the planet look red. So what their rocks are composed of makes it look red, and so that's why we see Mars as red. So very interestingly enough. Now Mars is different to us in the sense that we only have one moon. Mars has got 2 moons. Mars has got 2 moons, which is very different to us. So that is another thing about Mars. And lastly, let me just move my face out of the way. It takes almost double the amount of time for Mars to travel around the sun. So it takes 687 Earth days to orbit the sun. 687. Almost double the time it takes for Earth to orbit the sun. So very, very interesting. So boys and girls, that lesson was just talking about our 4 terrestrial planets. It is a lot of information to learn about each individual planet. So what I would suggest is maybe go back, watch the video again. I wanted to split up the planets into 2 lessons because, like I said, it is a lot of information, and the last thing I want is for you to have information overload. So the next time I see you, we will be discussing the gas giants and learning a little bit more about them. So for now, grade 4s, have a fantastic day. Hakuna Matata, and be kind to one another. Bye.